For reading that?
Yeah, I do.
Well, you might want to have that to refer to.
No, we'll just wing it. Tell me about the first thing you remember when you were a little girl.
The first thing I remember as a little girl probably does not sound very exciting for a little girl. You want me to start over?
I forgot to turn this on. Hold on a second. Okay. So let's go ahead. So
The first thing I remember as a little girl, I believe it's the first thing, and I have a picture of this somewhere, is that I'm a little girl at my grandmother's house, and I'm wearing my prettiest little dress, and I'm holding a little bouquet of flowers. Well, not everybody in the world had a Kodak at that time, but my uncles had the little box Kodaks, and they were making a picture of me standing by the picket fence in my pretty little dress holding the flowers. That's one of the first things I remember. Probably the second thing I remember is my grandfather's funeral. I do not remember it beginning, but I do remember this particular incident. I remember him as being very stern, being a very dignified man, and I was afraid of him because he was so dignified, but he was a very nice man and he was very kind. But the very first thing I probably remember about him was just what I've mentioned, his personality. My grandmother was very kind and very open and very vivacious and whatnot. And I can remember the conversation concerning my grandfather, that he was not very well. But I remember that it was all about dentistry, which does not sound like he's dying. But the reason I know that he was in good health at that time was that they had a big farm, a very big farm. And during the work times, that is the cultivating and the harvesting time, my grandmother had help to prepare a meal for the migrant workers who came in to work. And so they cooked a lot of food, and the kitchen was very big with a huge dining table. It was very long, but there was also a front porch to this kitchen part that had a large table. So they had not only that table, but they had the table inside the dining area, and they cooked a lot of food. I don't remember much about it, but I do remember my playhouse on the other side of the kitchen. Whatnot. There was a small little porch back there, and that's where I had my playhouse. So I remember playing there at the same time my grandmother would be busy with getting this food ready for the workers. Those, I think, are my very first memories, but they would go into my Aunt Callie. My dad had one sister, and she was a twin. The other twin was Corley, was the boy, and Aunt Callie was the girl, and she was the only girl in the family. Well, she was my second mother. She took care of me day in and day out. I would walk down the hill. She would meet me halfway, and she would take care of me. And I can remember the big tool area where she would take me on a tour. She would also take me to the Scuppernong vine, which was a muscadine, I guess that's the other name for it, huge vine that was on this elevated arbor, and you could just go under and eat till you were ready to drop, and she would always take me there. But I had many memories of her, and I guess the end of that dream was that one morning when I wakened, my dad told me that Aunt Callie had gotten married the night before, and I didn't know quite what that meant, but I found out that it meant complete separation from my Aunt Callie because she moved to live where her husband lived, and he worked for the Masonite Company in Laurel, and of course she went to live in the house that he had near the Masonite factory in Laurel. So that's how I lost my Aunt Callie as my companion. These are some of my very favorite memories. I remember the uncles, my dad's brothers, 3 of them, that they were kind and always good to me. On my mother's side, the contact was usually when my mom could talk my dad into going and spending the night with them, because they lived in the community up near Mount Olive, which was the next little town up the railroad, but they lived out in the country and were farmers. But that involved overnight stays and visits, but not the companionship that I had enjoyed with my dad's family. And they lived down the hill in the house, which is now the house that Hugh owns. And my house, as you know, was moved down the hill and had belonged to my maternal grandparents, and they had moved out. And when my parents married, they were put in that house, and that was my house always. So that's my beginning.
But your Aunt Callie was around when you got married.
Aunt Callie was around.
When you got married?
Oh, no. This was when I was a little girl.
Well, who helped you with your wedding dress?
Oh, well, no. That was my mother's wedding dress. That
yes. Okay.
That you're thinking about.
Okay.
And her family, of course, had made the dress, and my Aunt Vandy, who was a petite, darling little Southern lady who lived always with my grandparents and helped her rear the children, but she was the one who took over and did the handwork for my mother's dress. No, my wedding dress was many years later.
Right. Well, tell me about your schooling.
My what?
Your schooling. School.
Oh, my school. My first school was Ora, O-R-A. And it was the community for the loggers that had taken over the South. They were logging those long leaf pines all over the South, and they were big companies. And Ora was a residential community of big houses made of southern pine, and there was a Methodist church there. And they had the first school, they had the kindergarten, and I began going to the school at Ora in the kindergarten. But I walked with the neighborhood children, which was, probably 1.5 miles or 2 miles. Anyhow, I was a little kindergartner and they were bigger children, but the whole story was I could go along with them, and they were my protectors. They saw that I got to my class, and then they got me home. But the walking was too much for me, so my mother transferred me to the community school, Williamsburg, where I spent the rest of my pre-college life at Williamsburg, but I went to kindergarten there, and I learned to read, and my first little book was Baby Ray, and I just read it, and my dad was so proud of me, and the more pride he showed in my reading, the harder I read. So I just read Baby Ray, Baby Ray. And as you know, Anne, my daughter-in-law, found the book for me last year, and I had it copied for my kindergarten children here at Parkwood. But it was something that I shall remember with a lot of pride, and the teacher was so wonderful. Her name was Miss Warren. Miss Warren was so kind to me, and I thought she was the most beautiful character I had ever seen. Not only was she kind to me, but she was beautiful and young, and I was very attached to her.
Your family's farm, did your mother and father own the farm?
Did they own the farm?
Yeah.
The farm was owned by my maternal family. My grandmother, Samantha Jane, her family had owned the farm. And at some point, it was transferred to somebody in the county. I never knew who it was. But then my dad picked it up, I don't know, if it was, I think it was 16 section land which could be leased, and he leased it. Probably they had leased it before him. I don't really remember. But then he became the owner, and I remembered that he was the owner.
Well, did he hire workers to come work the farm?
He did some carpenter work to earn a little extra money, but he did the farming as well. And he did most of it. He never brought in extra workers very often because the farm was not that big. I think in all it was only about 100 acres. And that included part of the 16 section land which was leased and the part that he owned. And I do not know the part that he owned and the part that was 16 section, but I know that it was combined. But he did most of the farming.
So when your grandmother was cooking all day and had a table on the porch...
That's when my dad was a young man.
Yeah, but was she cooking just for family?
No, she was cooking for the migrant workers who were on that farm. My dad's family's farm, John.
So that was a different farm.
Yeah, that was my dad's farm, family. And his mother and his father owned that. But he had married my mother, and they were in the Robinson house up on the hill, where I was only house I ever lived in.
All right, so your grandmother on the maternal side and your grandfather on your maternal side, they did hire workers, but on the other side, on the paternal side...
Now that was the fraternal side, my father's side,
right,
that did the cooking. Had the big farm, and his name was John Evans, and her name was Samantha Jane.
Her name was Samantha Jane Robinson. And so on your mother's side, they did not hire workers.
No. That was my mother's side was a larger family, and they did the family farming. The children who were my mother's siblings, my mother's brothers and sisters, they helped with the farm. And they were good farmers. They were well-respected farmers. My grandfather was a leader in the community.